Greetings. Welcome. It's really nice to be with you here. So you might be wondering, you might say, this said it was a theater session, and yet we're not actually in a theater. Well, just to tell you what happened. So we had so many people register for this session that they decided that there literally was no room that was big enough to hold all of you. And so they said, we're going to have to just put you right out in the hallway here because that's the only way we're going to be able to accommodate everyone that's going to be coming today. And I said, you know, that sounds really good, but the keynote had quite a bit in terms of seats. Why didn't you just put me either as part of the keynote or just, you know, shortly afterwards? And they laughed, as many of you are laughing right now, you know. So Microsoft Office 365, avoiding the Icarus effect. Now, I know that many of you are here because you're just so curious as to what we mean by the Icarus effect. Or perhaps when you read the definition for the session and you saw the part about IT impotence, you said, okay, all right, there's going to be something good here. So let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then we can just jump right into the discussion ahead. So, for starters, I'm an Office Servers and Services MVP. I was an Exchange MVP, then became an Office 365 MVP, and now they kind of put us all in one bucket, so we don't know who we are anymore. We're just all kind of jumbled together. But we tend to kind of lean towards the things that we're experts in. So when folks ask me, I typically tell them an Exchange or Exchange Online MVP. At the same time, variety of other things here. I'm a co-founder of cliptraining.com, a provider of Windows and Office training videos for end users, as well as Conversational Geek. How many of you have been over to the Conversational Geek booth today? Only a few? Well, then the rest of you really want to get over there. Free books made by IT experts for IT experts. So just by all means, get over there and take a couple of books. And I'm also a technical author, sold over a dozen books, sold internationally. I'm a technical speaker, speak for Microsoft. Used to speak in rooms, now I'm out here in the hallway, so I don't know who I upset, but that's okay. We're here together as a nice, intimate group. Oh, by the way, don't worry. So my bio takes up only about half of the presentation. So we're just, you know, I have three or four more slides. I talk about growing up in Brooklyn and all these other things. So last but not least, I'm a technical consultant for Mimecast. And you might say, oh, Mimecast, why is that? Well, we're going to talk about how third-party solutions help to mitigate the risk that comes with Office 365. You know, a move to the cloud does come with a bit of risk, certainly, and it's not necessarily a one-to-one with what we had on premises and what we have in the cloud. But before we get too far into the discussion, let's talk about what exactly the Icarus effect is, right? So, how many of you know the story of Icarus? Right, a handful. So it's a story from Greek mythology where you had Daedalus and Icarus on the island of Crete. They were exiled, and Daedalus decides, you know what, I don't want to stay here. So using feathers and wax and glue, he creates wings for himself and his son Icarus. And he tells his son, he said, listen, son, this is going to work, but if you get too close to the sun, it's going to melt the wings, you're going to end up in the water, you're going to die. If you get too close to the water, you're going to have mist on the wings are going to get too heavy, you're going to end up in the water, you're going to die. So kind of keep it in the middle there. Use some good judgment. It was good advice, but what happened was when Icarus started to fly, he got so euphoric over it, he was just so excited, you know, flying. What happened? He got too close to the sun, and ultimately he ends up dying. Now, often when I have told this story, I'll ask the audience, I'll say, what do you think was the problem? And everyone goes after the technology. They say, well, the wings, of course, you know, the wings, you couldn't have had the proper, you know, it's like, no, wait a minute, it's Greek mythology. So the wings were fine. Daedalus made the trip, right? When we talk about technology, Office 365, yeah, are there pros and cons? Yes, of course, but there's nothing wrong with the technology. I mean, Office 365 works. Now, granted, there are certain things that you might want to enhance it with, certain things that you'd mitigate it with, but it works well. Which is one of the reasons why I decided to move from an Exchange on-premises world to one where I just continuously promote moving to the cloud for those organizations where it makes sense. Right? There are definitely times when I don't recommend that, but it works. So what's the problem? Well, the problem was that Icarus got too comfortable, too euphoric, and that can happen to any one of you. You move to Office 365 and you're so happy that you don't have to worry about hardware anymore. No need to worry about upgrades. You don't need to worry about, you know, the availability because of native data protection. And you have multiple passive copies strewn between two different data centers. That just creates a euphoria that you go, I don't have to worry about anything anymore. No, wait. You're getting too close to the sun now, right? And you need to be careful. So that's where we have to use some wisdom when it comes to Office 365. Office 365, much like other things that we use in the computing world, is part of a monoculture, right? A monoculture, we think of Windows. Windows is a monoculture. anything that has a weakness that is spread across millions and millions of devices is now a weakness. If you find a weakness in one, it's the same weakness you can exploit in the millions of other devices. Well, think about Office 365 with millions of mailboxes. If a weakness is found, that weakness can now be exploited across the entire thing. So it's a monoculture. That's not necessarily a horrible thing, but it's something that has to be in your head before you put all your eggs in one basket. Or really, in a sense, with Office 365, you're not just putting all your eggs in one basket, you're putting all of your eggs in the same basket everyone else is putting all of their eggs, which just seems a little icky as an illustration, but you get the point. The point is that you're in a multi-tenant environment, right? It's a target-rich environment, and it's ultimately a situation where you're sharing. You're sharing, in a sense, depending on the size of your company, you're sharing server space, rack space, whatever it is, you're sharing with others because it's a hosted environment, right? And as a result, when one is a target, all are a target. So you're making yourself part of that monoculture, right? Not necessarily a bad thing, just something you should be aware of, because you might say, well, what else can I do, right? What else can I do if we're all part of this, a big machine we call Office 365? Well, hey, did you know that there are solutions that you can bolt on to enhance things like your security, things like, well, I'll just show you. The things that we typically consider risks with Office 365. So security or data loss prevention, disaster recovery and availability, archiving or compliance needs, monitoring. And you say, why do these topics seem so familiar to me? Where have I seen these topics before? Well, I'll tell you, when you go out on the expo floor and you're walking around, right, you'll see different solutions for what? For Office 365 monitoring. Why? Because there's a gap there, right? If there wasn't a gap there, there wouldn't be 20 organizations on the floor trying to sell you additional enhanced security or monitoring. And the same thing with security or compliance. So these are the gaps in Office 365. Now, granted, you'll read in the marketing brochures, the sales brochures, no, you don't need anything else to bolt onto Office 365 because we have everything built in. Okay, look, there's a lot of things that are built in, right? And we appreciate that. And in some cases, especially depending on what you're coming from on premises, it may be light years ahead of what you have. So for you, you might be thinking, you're right, it is built in. So it's not that the marketing materials are wrong, but if you're dealing with an enterprise grade situation where you have a solid security solution and a variety of other solutions, then moving to Office 365 alone is not going to cut it for you. When we go to any environment with Exchange on premises, right? And how many of you are still using Exchange on premises, right? You notice how I don't say on premise because that's actually incorrect, right? Yeah, there you go. So here's what you typically have, right? I've never, in my years working with Exchange, and I've worked with Exchange since almost the beginning, started my career in Lower Manhattan, Goldman Sachs, Merrill Lynch, Solomon Smith Barney, was there with Merrill Lynch when they deployed Exchange 5.5. So I've been around this for a long time. But I've never walked into any environment where it's an enterprise-grade environment. We're not talking about a mom-and-pop shop with 20 people, a small business server deployment, right? Never walked in and saw an Exchange server and just an Exchange server. No, right? We know that we surround Exchange with an ecosystem set of solutions. So backup recovery, you don't go in and say, so what are you using for backup recovery? Well, Windows Server backup has actually really come a long way. No, yes it has, but we know that we use some type of third-party solution. Whether it's a Commvault or one of these other solutions, we use a third-party solution. Archiving, typically we don't use what's built in. No, we go with some type of a software solution or an appliance or something, cloud-based. Same thing for security, secure gateway. Some type of a solution, multiple solutions typically in a defense in-depth approach, right? And then we have some type of, either a cloud-based solution. But we don't just say, well, Exchange 2013 came out with some really good, version 1 anti-malware. I think I'm just going to use that. No, typically, we go with some other third-party solution. So what changes when we move to the cloud, right? You say, well, we move to the cloud and all of a sudden it's all built in, isn't it? Right? Well, certain things are built in. Microsoft has a lot more control of their environment in a hosted scenario as opposed to what you can get with on-premises. So there are a lot of things they can do to enhance Exchange that they couldn't do with an on-premises deployment. That's a given. And that's great that they're able to do that. However, that doesn't necessarily mean you're getting a one-to-one with what you had on-premises. Now you move to Office 365, and is the security good enough? Right? Or would you do better with a little additional security to protect you from things like ransomware and spear phishing and impersonation, wire transfer attacks? Well, you say, I don't know. That's a good question. That's why we're having this session, right? Or the compliance, depending on where you're from. If you're from Europe, maybe you're thinking about GDPR. Is what Office 365 good enough? Right? Or would you do better with some other third-party archiving solution? See, these are the things you have to think about. But the difference with Office 365, as opposed to this scenario, is with this scenario, you could choose your personal favorite solutions, best of breed, best in class, Gartner Magic Quadrants, and you could choose something different for each one. You can't do that with Office 365. Or you can, but it's not really the smart thing to do. And what I mean by that is, if you do that, you're daisy chaining multiple solutions onto the front end, right? Microsoft says that's bad, right? Like crossing the stream's bad, it's bad, right? So you say, well, why is that bad? Well, it's bad because you're adding multiple points of failure if you add multiple solutions, and you're daisy chaining these things out, and you're also creating additional latency. So you say, latency is bad. Okay, don't want that. How do we avoid that? The answer is an all-in-one, right? You need an all-in-one solution that kind of looks at all of this and says, hey, we're a solution that can do security and archiving and monitoring and backup recovery, all of it. It's got to do it all. And it's got to be able to do it all in such a way that it's not where, hey, we're great with security, not so great with archiving, not so great with monitoring. You can't have that. It's got to be great with all of these different pieces. So what happened here is when Office 365 really started to take off, what we started to see is a variety of different organizations that used to exist either started to merge together, right? It's like, hey, I do security, you do archiving, we're in trouble because I'm siloed and so are you, and that's not going to work. So maybe we should kind of Frankenstein our thing together to make it work together, right? That's exactly what it looks like oftentimes, is Frankenstein's monster. But there were a few organizations out there that were already prepared for this, that were already kind of thinking ahead, and or in some cases really just got lucky, and they were already set up to do the all-in-one for organizations. That's what you need to be looking for, the all-in-one solutions. Now, we live in a world where we're seeing headlines like this every day, right? Various ransomware and spear phishing, and it's overwhelming, isn't it? How many of you have been the target of some type of ransomware, spear phishing attack, or at least an attempt, right? Everyone, exactly. Now here's the thing. Okay, so you're looking at how to protect your environment. Now Microsoft provides Exchange Online Protection, which is your basic anti-spam, anti-malware solution, right? They also offer, at a cost, Advanced Threat Protection, right? Which has your safe links and your safe attachments, right? You say, well, that's pretty good, actually. I've got it all. But is there more that can be done here? Well, that's where you have to really analyze what it is they provide. Because when you look at the security coming from the same vendor that is also providing the system itself, you create within the environment a double monoculture, right? That's even scarier. I'll give you an example of what that is. So you have Windows, right? And then you have Windows Defender, right? Now Windows Defender is a great solution. However, most enterprise deployments of Windows typically go with some other. How many of you have a solution on top of Windows in your environment? Sophos or Malwarebytes? A few? What do you use? What is it? McAfee? Okay, good. Others? What is it? Okay, Sidelax? Never heard of that. Okay, so obviously there are other solutions out there that you add on. Why not just use Windows Defender? Well, Windows Defender is a good solution, but for some, they realize I need to do more here. Plus, in some cases, it's not necessarily more, it's just they prefer to do something different because the operating system is being handled by Microsoft, and they say, you know what, we're going to go with something different for the protection, right? Something that gives me a little more control, a few additional features. That's on you to do the research. What I've seen from a lot of IT folks is they kind of give up. When the move to the cloud is made, and maybe oftentimes it's not that they made the decision to move to the cloud, so they just give up. Sometimes you give up because you feel helpless, right? That's what I like to call that feeling of IT impotence, right? Helplessness, right? It has more than one meaning, folks. I see a lot of you guys out there cringing. It's like, the word impotence has a lot of different meanings. So, ultimately it's a feeling of helplessness. How do you resolve that? Well, again, it's by looking at what Microsoft provides and seeing what flexibility you have there, and then also looking and seeing what third-party tools might give you in order to give you back some of that control that you do lose when you move to the cloud. So we look at this. What is the solution for the security concerns like ransomware and spear phishing and so forth? Number one, you need to know what exactly is built into Advanced Threat Protection, because we're talking about things like safe attachments. What is safe attachments? An email comes in with an attachment. Microsoft takes it and opens it up in their sandboxing solution, which doesn't mimic anything else that we see in the market. Enterprise-grade sandboxing solutions have a variety of different features that we've come to rely upon, like, for example, time incrementation. Right? With time incrementation, you take this document, and if it's a weaponized attachment, you can kind of poke it by incrementing the time, moving it forward so that you kind of poke this thing into detonation. Right? Well, does Microsoft's solution have that? We don't have a lot of details in terms of what Microsoft's solution does or doesn't do. Can't find anything on it. It says that it opens up the document in an Azure VM and looks to see if anything occurs. There's a 5 to 30 minute SLA, and ultimately it passes it forward. Great, what else does it do? Love to tell you, but I can't find any more information on it. So we need a little more exposure as to what it is. Now keep in mind, it's a version 1.0. They just created this thing. So it hasn't been in development for the last decade like other sandboxing solutions that are out there. Right? So now I'm not anti-sandboxing. However, I like the idea of having a sandboxing solution that does time incrementation. Because if you're like me, you open up a document and you don't open it and close it. You open up a document and you go to lunch. I opened up a document before I came here. It's still open, unless the system is blue screen, in which case then I'll have to open it again, right? So typically I open up documents and I leave them there until the system crashes, right? So that means there's plenty of time. If you're a malware writer, if you're a ransomware writer, you don't have to set this thing to detonate immediately. You can set these things to detonate over a period of time. So you need a sandboxing solution that's more mature and is really looking at time incrementation and other things to kind of poke this thing. Well, what else? Well, I also like looking at solutions that have innovation, right? Things that are a little bit ahead of their time. I'll give you an example, right? And I'm just going to be honest with you, because I work with Mimecast, it's obvious that I know more of what they do than what others do. So I'm just going to give you one of the examples from something that they do that you might find cool. So when a document comes in, it's a Word document. Maybe it's a macro-enabled Word document that has ransomware attached, which was actually a very recent attack that came through Office 365 last year, right? You say, okay, I've got this. Mimecast will take your documents, and their first line of defense is to convert it to a PDF. So if it's a Word document, it converts it to PDF. If it's a PDF, it converts it to HTML and then to PDF. If it's an image, it converts it to PDF. You might say, well why? What's that? Nothing can survive the conversion process. So if you're like me, 80% of all of the documents I receive in a given day, I just need to read. I don't need to edit and work on and play with it. I just need to read this thing, right? That assures me that any document that comes in that gets converted is now rendered useless. No malware can survive the conversion process. And it takes all of what, half of a second to convert a document, right? So now there's no time lag on getting that document, and it's converted. Now, if I want the original, if I have to do some editing, I can click a button, it reaches back out, it gets me the original after sandboxing it using time incrementation, which we've already established is important, and now I can go to work on that document. So think about it, in a world of ransomware, right, it's cool to have some innovation in this department. You know, we can't just continue to do the same old thing. It's the same thing when it comes to the other half of advanced threat protection, which is safe attachments. Safe links. Safe links has a block list that will check your links before you ultimately go to a site. You say, well, that's a good thing. It is, but it's a static block list. In other words, if the site is not a known URL, if it's not known and it's not on the block list, then you will not be warned that there's a problem, right? So, okay. So think about spear phishing. So let's say I wanted to do a spear phishing attack on you folks here. So one night, I find out that all of you guys are going to Ignite. How do I find out? Well, you've posted it on LinkedIn and Twitter and everything else. So now I know you're going, right? And so I mentioned that I'm from fake company XYZ, and you've won an Apple Watch. And you're thinking, I've never won anything before. This is fantastic. All I got to do is click this link and I can fill. Well, it's obviously legit because, I've got my logo, right, in the email. And I know you're going to the conference, right? So how else would I know that if, it wasn't legit? So you click the link. And now I'm actually watching you through your webcam. Hello, right? I can do that, right? It's not that hard. But let's say I'm being a little sloppy this time. So I could make a separate URL for each of you. But instead, I'm going to use the same URL for all of you, right? I'm also going to drink a little bit before I do this, and so I'm going to make it so obvious that, with all the words all messed up, you're going to know that this is a spear phishing attack. Absolutely, there's no doubt. So you come in and you see it, and what do? You see it's a spear phishing attack, you report it. Everyone reports it, and it's the same link. Here's the thing. So now you come in, right? This gentleman right here, he's not paying attention. He had a bad morning, right? He comes in, He clicks the link. Well, it's been days of this. The question is, have enough people reported this spear phishing attack for it to get added to the block list? I don't know. I don't know. If it hasn't reached the right threshold and the thresholds aren't posted, then I don't know. So the other thing is that there's no way in a million years that spear phishing attack would have occurred. Why? Because I would have used a different URL for each of you. Because I would have made sure that my spelling was perfect. These guys are good, right? And you would have clicked that link and you would have, basically given away your information. So how do you fix that? Well, a static block list isn't going to cut it. I'm sorry, right? You need something more dynamic. You need a solution that will go out to the site when I click the link and will scan to see what's going on that page, right? That's what we need. And so ultimately, that's where you need to do your homework and figure out, is what Microsoft offering enough, or should you go for a third-party solution that can offer you something a little bit more dynamic, right? A couple of other fun things, just some fun ideas. So MX Toolbox, some of you have used it. It's a free tool. It's online, MX Toolbox. One of the other things I like to point out is that good hackers, they like to case the joint, Imagine you're driving down a road, right? And you're here in Florida, you're on a beautiful street, and you see two houses. One house, they're both $1 million houses. They probably got a lot of nice stuff in them. On the one side, there's no gate, there's no fence, there's no beware of dog. Here in Florida, you're allowed to carry, so there's no beware of owner sign, there's nothing. Nothing indicating that there's any protection in this home, right? Okay. Across the street, just as beautiful a home, you see a fence, a gate, strong iron, metal gate. It's got a beware of dog sign. It says, here, we use this security system. We will call the cops. Don't even try it. We're packing. The whole thing, right? Okay. Which house are you going to rob? Right? Obviously the one that's the more low-hanging fruit. Unless there's a revenge motive or some type of, for hire corporate espionage involved, you're not going to go after the home that looks more protected. Well, the same is true when you do a simple MX Toolbox lookup of any company you're looking to attack from an email perspective, right? So the first one, it basically just says this company is using Office 365 protection and that's it. Nothing fancy, right? That's it, they've got nothing. That makes me wonder, so is it that they don't know that they need more security, or are they just being cheap? Are they just saying, yeah, I don't really want to spend the extra money, right? What else do they not spend the money on? Do they not use end user security awareness training to try to help their end users? Do they not use some type of a solution on the desktops like Sophos or others or McAfee or, right? I don't know, but they're going on my short list, right? Because I think that they're pretty open. Whereas the next company, you see a variety of different third-party links because the MX records are pointing off, in this case, to Mimecast. But in your case, you might have some other solution. And the point is that right away, I lose interest here. I can't help but say, you know what? These folks have put a little money into their security, and I just think that this is probably not the best approach. They're protected, right? So you can, at times, ward off an attack simply by putting a little effort in, because a little bit of a search can quickly show you this. The other thing to keep in mind is vault recreation. Vault recreation is a concept where the bad guys, if they want to be good at what they're doing, they're going to recreate the scenarios that they're using for attacks. So, have any of you seen Ocean's 11? Right, a couple of you? You remember at the beginning of Ocean's 11 where Brad Pitt and George Clooney are stealing the plans for the vault, right? And in my mind, I'm thinking, well, that's because they're gonna rob the vault, right? And yes, that's true. But do you remember that they used those plans first to create a new version of the vault in a warehouse so they can practice? They recreate the vault. Do you think that hackers that are really good at what they do, do you think they do the same thing? Absolutely. And how easy is it to recreate an Office 365 vault? Well, it costs less than $100. You register a legitimate domain name, you get a legitimate portal started, and then you start going, all right, let's throw some crap at this and see if anything gets through. Something gets through. Now there it is. That's what I'm going to use, right? Why would I just take my chances and just kind of wing it? No, I want to make sure this works. This is about money. This is about, this is my job. So I'm going to recreate the vault. Not that hard to do, right? A lot harder to do if you check out a company and you see they've got something bolted onto the front end. Then it's like, oh, wait a minute. What is that going to block? I don't know. Is it going to get through that? Maybe. Is it going to get through that and then get through I don't know, right? So maybe I don't want to attack that company. Yeah, maybe not, right? So you can see how you need to start thinking a little bit more like the way the bad guys think, right? These are some of the things that we have to be aware of. I know we don't have a lot more time, right? Compliance is another thing that I like to point out as a piece of the puzzle when it comes to the Icarus effect. right? Yes, Microsoft offers intelligent data governance. There's legal hold. That's really what it is behind the scenes. They'll hold your data, right? I like to, it allows your data to just bloat and bloat and bloat, right? Right there in the mailbox. Yay, that's what we want, bloated mailboxes, right? You'll never, ever be able to move that thing once it gets past a certain size, right? But here's the thing. So what would you rather do then? What would be better than that? Well, perhaps a separate data bank archive, something cloud-based so that you ultimately, if you're looking to move off of your on-premises environment, you put it in the cloud, you have an archive. It's typically faster, high performance, single pane of glass, as opposed to in your hybrid environments, you have to do multiple e-discovery searches, one for your on-premises Exchange, one for your Office 365. If you're dealing with a situation where you deal with a lot of litigation, right, which some organizations do, right, that may not be an enterprise-grade solution for you. So you need to look, again, for the all-in-one that looks at security and compliance for archiving and so forth. Last but not least is availability. Now, we know that Microsoft provides an availability solution called Native Data Protection, which is fantastic. It's great for your data itself because there's multiple passive copies. However, Office 365 still goes down. I mean, it goes out from time to time. It seems like almost every summer it goes out, right around June, July. In fact, last year, it went down on June 30th, the last day of the quarter, right? Salespeople were going ballistic. It was down for 9 hours, right? That's a problem. Now, some of you might say, actually, I can be down for 9 hours. I don't know many that could, but I've actually heard people say I can be down for 9 hours. Okay, then you're great. Then you're covered. You're good. But if you can't be down for 9 hours, or 6, or 3, or 1, then you might need to look at a continuity solution, something that allows you to continue to work despite the fact that Office 365 is down. You might say, is there such a thing? Yes. Do your research, okay, and find them. Right? Continuity solution. It's a separate means of continuing to work. Now you might say, well, there are web portals. I know that I can set up a web portal and people can, that's great. Why not be able to do it right from Outlook? Wouldn't it be nice if your people could just work from Outlook and continue to just send and receive email as if nothing had happened despite the fact that Office 365 was down, right? Look for it, search for it, and you'll find it. Now, we're out of time. So I'm just going to throw this out for any little Q&A that we might have at this point. I want you to visit, if you want to come visit the Mimecast booth, I'm giving away a copy of my book, Conversational Office 365 Risk Mitigations. It's right down here, straight out. You can't miss the booth. It's on the right-hand side. If you miss the giveaway, you can always go over to the Conversational Geek booth. It's booth 1264. We're giving away a ton of free books, including the Office 365 Risk Mitigation book. Books are free. You're welcome to get them. You can see my Twitter and my email. By all means, please reach out to me, follow me on Twitter, email me, and if you have evaluations, fill out those evaluations. I'm going to turn it over to any Q&A, any questions that you might have at this point. Questions? Really, that's fantastic. That means that I've answered all of your questions right from the get-go, right? Listen, the whole point of this discussion was to try to get you to think a little bit about what's built into Office 365, where the gaps are, and where you need to continue to look at third-party solutions to fill those gaps. We've always done that, okay? It's not a slight against Microsoft to say that we still need to do that. If we didn't, there would be no Expo, okay? So the Expo is filled with organizations who feel like, hey, they've created something fantastic here. We would like to bolt onto that, right? So the question is, where are the best bolt-on solutions? Obviously, you don't want to bolt something on that already exists, that's built in. No. So you look for things, that can enhance what you already have. You look at your budget and you look to see what is the most important thing to you, like security, for example, and then you see what things you can do to mitigate what Office 365 provides out of the box, right? So if I had an impact, fantastic. I hope that you enjoyed this session, and I'll say this, because it's something that a good friend of mine, Mark Manassi, likes to say at the end of his sessions, and that is, remember to use this information for good and not for evil. Thank you very much.